has a chance to become God. According to the degree of divine power, people here are divided into several types: demigods, true gods, elder, and higher gods. Every person, upon reaching the age of 18, can awaken the sphere of the gods within themselves in order to find their irreplaceable representative. Among the representatives, there is also a gradation of ranks. The more talented a person is, the more potential his representative may have. This potential will allow him to develop to the highest level. The question arises whether Charlie Walter, the man who awakened the divine domain, will be able to rewrite his destiny under such conditions, since he has obtained a lower-level representative, a locust. A voice is heard, emotionally asking the interlocutor how he dares to argue with the speaker. Chade Bone demands to give him the points of divine power, otherwise the sphere of the gods will be destroyed. Chade is an arrogant school bully who was mistakenly given incredible powers by the heavens. His god sphere contains the strength of a 5,000 orc army. He always gets what he wants. The fair-haired guy answers him with fervor, provoking him to act. The main character ended up in his body. He is weak because his representative is a weak locust. This weak man dared to answer such a strong one because of what happened yesterday, namely because our hero ended up in this wonderful world where everyone can become God. Only now the time traveler found himself in the body of a weak-willed outcast, who on his 18th birthday awakened the sphere of gods with a representative, who is a locust. On the bed with an oxygen mask on his face lies an elderly man, knowing that his grandson's parents are lost in the chaotic sea of stars of the Imperial Academy. But they must be alive, the old man is almost certain. The old man asks to find them if possible, and the young man remembers the words of the girl, saying that if he is ready to become her slave, feeding the locust to her thunderer, he will definitely finish school and get a diploma. Charlie is roughly grabbed by the shoulder by a bully, ordered to bring him 100 points of divine power tomorrow, otherwise it will be bad. His locust will be destroyed, as well as the sphere of the gods, and hope will be shattered into pieces. The guy puts his hand to his head. Apparently the difficulty of this game was set to hellish from the very beginning. He only has locust as representatives. That's not even enough for a diploma, let alone the academy. The guy looks at the capsule connected to the devices and thinks that first he needs to deal with Chade. He is not going to just stand and watch someone ruin his life. He climbs into the capsule and puts on the helmet. Since he came to this world, he must at least try to fix the situation he found himself in. Simply giving up would be disrespectful to the other time travelers. The system notifies the guy about connecting to the sphere of the gods. The download reaches 100%. The connection is successful, as reported by the corresponding system window that appears. Charlie's eyes widen at the sight before him. His gaze is presented with an incredibly beautiful landscape with mountains and an abundance of greenery. The guy looks at this whole spectacle silently and slightly puzzled. He suggests that his representatives are a group of locusts resting on the grass, the insects flashing their beady red eyes. Charlie opens his status system window and begins to study it carefully. According to this body's memories, it didn't have the talent chosen son of heaven or the life sacrifice ability before, so they appeared after the transfer. Charlie reads the descriptions. The talent helps to get one unique ability for each level achieved, and the ability allows to get something equal to it once a day for the life of a creature. The guy thinks, apparently he received the talent during the transfer, and the ability was received thanks to becoming a divine being. This is not bad. There is a possibility of the grandfather's wish coming true. But this is only possible if Charlie manages to survive the encounter with Chade tomorrow. The guy doubts his locust. Charlie opens his representative system window, reading the description in more detail. Something catches his attention. He thinks about what he has read, turning it over in his head and comparing one thing with another for analysis. And then the guy has a revelation. He understands what's what. With an anticipatory smile, he's going to take a risk and make a big bet. If Charlie wins, he will instantly become a master. But if he loses, he will lose everything that he has even at this moment. The next morning, a girl in a short skirt walks through an office full of guys who look at her with their mouths open in admiration. She approaches Charlie's desk and asks if he has thought about her offer and is ready to become her slave. The guy looks at his potential interlocutor sullenly. With her hands on her hips, the girl says that if he accepts her offer, she promises that no one will dare to touch the guy with a finger until the end of the year. After listening to his interlocutor, Charlie, frowning even more, refuses, without even looking at the one who made the offer. The girl puts her hand down on the table in front of her opponent, indignant, asking if he understood what he just said. Without her protection, he would simply be eaten alive. But the guy smiles. Maybe she's right, and they really will manage to devour him before he gets out of here. But he'll still prefer to refuse. Even he has dignity. The girl turns around to leave, and finally throws words at the guy about how he will regret his decision. The guy takes a heavy sigh. Chade and several of his buddies approach Charlie. The Orc Lord asks with a malicious grin. If the guy has the 100 points he asked for, the escorts join the leader. One of them tells them not to do anything stupid, not to make them strain themselves, and the second threatens to destroy the opponent's god sphere if he does not follow their request. The guy looks at them with hopelessness. A large hand falls on the boy's shoulder. It belongs to Chade, and Charlie, frowning, asks him to remove it immediately. The big guy asks how the guy dares to argue with him, and promises to destroy the sphere of the gods if the divine power points are not given up voluntarily. Charlie's gaze becomes hard and filled with determination as he tells his opponent to try if he dares. Chade looks at his interlocutor with bewilderment, not understanding what is happening to him today. Because before this guy was even afraid to raise his head, and now this, and the latter, continues to look confidently. The hooligans look towards the girl with pink hair who had approached our hero earlier. Judging by her appearance, it is definitely not about her. Classmates begin to provoke potential participants into a fight. One of them is interested in what a destroyed god sphere looks like, and the locust greatly reduces the average strength level of the class. And they also say that the Chad Orc army is among the top 60 representatives in the school. It is interesting to take a look at it. Inspired by flattery, he asks Charlie not to say later that he was not given a chance. The bully pulls out a card, saying that he feels sorry to waste even 10 points on someone like his opponent. This card is Invasion. With its help, you can invade the world of the opponent's god sphere. Charlie looks at what is happening with bewilderment and wide-eyed eyes, internally preparing himself for the worst. The guy is pulled into the open portal and he makes a transition. The young man's face displays determination mixed with the expectation of something bad. He lands on a hard surface with the same expression on his face. The boy's body is enveloped in residual currents that are a consequence of the teleportation. The movement takes a fair amount of energy, so the guy flops down on his butt and, making a visor out of his hand, looks more closely at the huge gates in front of him. The next moment they open, revealing a black crowd of burning, red flashing eyes, behind which lightning flashes and smoke billows. The crowd approaches, and it becomes clear to Charlie that it consists of angry orcs, who, judging by their appearance, are not friendly. Above the gates, the image of Chade appears, smiling predatorily, commanding in the name of the orc god to defeat the army of the locust of his enemy and destroy the world of his sphere of the gods. The orcs listen carefully to the words of their master, heeding every word, and continue to slowly move forward, led by their leader. At the end of the speech, the monsters raise their green, tightly clenched fists and, as one, let out a menacing cry. The viewers watch the orcs on the screen raising their hands in the air. Some of them think that the army has been replenished with at least 1,000 orcs. It seems that Chade is already in the top 50 of the school. Someone parries. Each of the monsters is armed with an axe. This already claims a place among the 30 best, and someone else pays attention to the unusual creature. There is no chance for the opponent. The pink-haired girl standing behind the crowd snorts in displeasure. Cyan is also watching the battle. Chade's opponent stands up to his full height, and with his hand extended with fingers spread, commands the self-detonating locust to appear out of nowhere and attack his enemies. The observers are surprised by the red insect, thinking that locusts should not be like that. But some of them guess that the insects are self-detonating locusts, which are an elite type. He shares this information with his colleagues, but also remembers that Charlie's god sphere only contained ordinary insects, and wonders when he managed to do so, and in such large numbers. The interlocutor aggressively tries to parry. Elite locusts were insects and still are. They have no chance against orcs, so you shouldn't expect much from Charlie. A swarm of self-detonating insects with hundreds of tiny wings rushes to attack the green monsters with all their zeal, and they also run forward frantically, straight at them. The space is filled with loud sounds of explosions, leaving behind decent nuclear mushrooms. Charlie watches the scene before him from a distance, hope on his face as he remembers what happened the day before. The guy stands in the center of a pentagram drawn on a hard surface and glowing with purple light. His hands folded into an ornate groove, his face focused. He's gonna take a big risk and make a big bet. Charlie is gonna leave 1,000,000 adults to breed and sacrifice the rest. A tall purple column of flame rises into the air, in which small winged bodies of locusts can be seen, illuminating a significant area around with its hot light. Unable to resist these purple tongues, the insects perish, having been offered as a promised sacrifice. The guy looks at several options available to him, opened up by a generous sacrifice, and thoughtfully reads the descriptions of each one, so as not to allow himself to make a mistake in choosing. 10,000 goblin warriors sound tempting, so he can deal with tomorrow's problem. But the action is one time, which is not a big benefit. The life-giving spring will help the representatives. The evolution of the locusts will occur, but it will take time, and the battle will be tomorrow. So this is also not the best option. The third one is more suitable, because the effect is aimed at the representatives and will not disappear later. Charlie puts his palm forward. A crystal forms above it, enveloped in streams. Like himself, the guy's face is serious. The young man's hand squeezes hard, shattering the crystal into many translucent fragments. Charlie runs forward with a determined look on his face, holding one of the self-detonating locusts in his hand. He stops and throws the insect forward, leaving an explosion in its wake. The guy is happy, considering himself lucky, and admitting that the orcs can survive a single explosion. But with an increase in quantity, something might work. You just need to experiment. The site of the explosion and subsequent nuclear mushroom cloud is covered in clouds of smoke spreading in all directions, obscuring the view. Those watching the battle also do not see what is happening, but their interest is inflamed more and more. They were expecting a completely different fight. As some of the haze clears, the sight reveals orcish bodies scattered around the perimeter, with only one monster standing on its feet, its face twisted in rage. Fluttering and with his eyes flashing red, he clutches his solar plexus and moves forward. Charlie stands in front of the orc, holding his hands in his pockets, and red, almost transparent threads rise up from him, as if tying dozens of insects to himself. A smile touches Kian's lips. The girl speaks out openly, saying that it has become a little more interesting now. The locust, flying away from its owner, heads towards the enemy who remains on his feet, who can only watch indifferently as it approaches, because he can do nothing. Chade's angry, thunderous voice is heard, commanding the surviving orcs to return to their native sphere of the gods as quickly as possible. The same ones, standing in front of the open gates, with faces distorted with hatred, look angrily at their enemy. A victorious smile plays on Charlie's face. He enjoys the enemy's escape, but it's too late. The guy points his hand with a pentagram in his direction, ordering him to catch up. A thick and sharp stream of locusts bursts through the gate, listening to the speech of the master when it is necessary to invade the sphere of the gods of Chade. The collision is followed by explosions and all the components that come out of it. Chade tells his opponent to command the insects to leave his sphere. The wounded orcs meanwhile cough up blood, unable to do anything about their inevitable defeat. Out of desperation, Chad admits his defeat, asking to remove the locusts from his domain and leave the orcs alone. His rival listens attentively and seriously to the proposal. He smiles, asking and reminding why he would do this. Wasn't it Chad who was going to destroy Charlie's sphere? He thinks it would be only fair to destroy someone else's in revenge. The rival is furious and afraid. He says that the boy will not dare to do this, because otherwise his parents will destroy Charlie. Chade's father is a demigod, and his mother is about to become one. With a blissful smile, Charlie orders the locusts to destroy the enemy sphere and allows them to not even hold back. As if waiting for this order, the insects rush towards the necessary object with all the agility they are capable of. Chade turns to his opponent with tears, asking him to stop and admitting defeat. He promises that he will never bother Charlie again and will do anything if he stops. The guy smiles triumphantly, saying that he doesn't need anything from him. He just wants him to suffer the fate that he wanted to bestow on him. Suddenly, Charlie is overtaken by a strong male voice asking the young man to stop. To his right, an image of a man appears, saying that Charlie has won. There is no point in going that far. Chade looks at his savior with tears in his eyes. Rejoicing at the appearance of the teacher, he asks Laramie to stop this madman and stutters about his parents. But the nimble insects continue their attack, driving their bodies into the solid sphere. They find the most vulnerable spots and cracks and attack them precisely, wanting to complete their mission as quickly as possible. Chade continues to scream on the ground about the injustice of this world, continuing to try to beg for help from Teacher Laramie, who is hanging in the air, and Charlie is also standing nearby. The man looks at the latter, asking him not to pretend he didn't hear, and he slowly turns his gaze to his interlocutor. Smiling, he says that he heard perfectly well and asks the teacher what he forgot there. The man says that as a class teacher, he is responsible for his students, so it is only natural that he decided to stop this madness. Then the guy asks another question. Where was the teacher when Chade and the others were bullying Charlie, extorting divine power points? Why didn't he intervene then? The man thinks to himself about the difference between the boys, since Charlie is practically a nobody, and Chade's parents are demigods, and out loud suggests talking about it after Charlie comes to his senses. The guy asks the last question. If he were in the loser's place now, would the teacher intervene in the same way as he did now? The man is silent, and Charlie is not even surprised. He thought so. The guy's face expresses disappointment, although he was convinced of everything he wanted. At the same moment, the locusts mercilessly attack the sphere of Chad, enveloping it in clouds of nuclear haze and delivering decisive, destructive blows. The owner of this place sits on the ground and weeps around the crumbling monastery, the heart of which has just been destroyed. Standing in front of his teacher, Charlie asks him to leave his domain now, crystal shards flying around. The broadcast ends, and the stunned viewers continue to stare at the blacked-out screen, their mouths open. Chade sits on the floor, leaning against the wall in an exhausted pose, not believing that his classmate actually did this. The office door opens slightly, and Teacher Laramie looks inside, telling Charlie to come to him immediately. But no one answers him, and the man enters the classroom, looks around the room and asks where the student he needs is. One of his classmates hesitantly answers that it seems he went home. The man's face is distorted with anger. Clenching his fingers into a fist, he promises in front of the entire class that he will immediately get Charlie expelled. The last one is inside his sphere of gods. Now there is a wasteland, locusts are flying around, and the guy says that it is time to sum up the battle. There are about 18,000 self-destructing locusts left, and the young man concludes that they need to be multiplied, confident that they will still be useful. Smiling, Charlie raises his hand into the air, above the palm of which a red fragment appears, which is a fragment of the core of the sphere of Chade. The guy is going to attach it to the core of his own. After the keyword, join, the shard rises higher and bright reddish fiery threads begin to extend from it. By adding a piece of another sphere, this place is enriched again, becoming even more fertile than before and receiving additional benefits. The guy is beaming, he is satisfied, although he understands that this is not enough to last until graduation. He recalls the words of his former opponent and believes that he won't be able to cope if two demigods come out against him at once, and judging by the teacher's behavior, the school won't protect him either. He will have to rely on his own strength, and as the first step towards improvement, Charlie decides to exchange the iron orc hammer he received for something a little more useful. He doesn't have to wait long. A system notification arrives almost immediately, which surprises the guy very much, because he didn't expect the answer to come so quickly. Someone actually responded to the trade offer by offering a flame lava crystal. Charlie recalls that these crystals seem to increase the representative's resistance to fire. This can also increase the power of the explosion. The guy decides to confirm the exchange, because it will significantly strengthen his self-detonating locust. He stands in front of a fragment of Chad's sphere core and admires the golden threads extending from it. A previously unseen species of locust appears on the ground. Charlie looks at the description. Such insects are called magma, and their talent, accordingly, is magma explosion. The guy walks closer to the nearest representative and squatting down, carefully lifts him up. In order to test his strength, he throws the insect in front of him, causing an explosion. The explosion has definitely become more powerful. Now the explosion of these babies can be compared to the explosion of a hand grenade. Adding to all this is the flying magma, and the damage and radius of damage are also impressive. Now you can consider that Charlie has a lot of fragmentation grenades. A scream is heard from the deputy principal's office. An angry parent speaks out about the destruction of his son's sphere core. It can no longer be restored, and the school has still not given an explanation. The teacher tries to explain to Chade's father that he was the one who first broke in, and that he had previously bullied some of the students. But the man's face is impenetrable. He gives off a bad aura when the demigod asks if the woman is only blaming his son. It turns out that neither the school nor the teachers are involved in what happened. The man turns to look at his wife as she, arms crossed over her chest, stubbornly expresses her opinion. She believes that her son, who destroyed the core, must be punished. The almost demigoddess believes that this student should, at the very least, be expelled. Standing in his world surrounded by representatives, Charlie decides to use the growth acceleration skill to make as many magma locusts as possible. A system window appears in front of the guy, notifying him of a call. Deputy Director Sawyer is calling him. Charlie furrows his brows, thinking that this was entirely expected, and accepts the challenge. The woman greets him and introduces herself purely formally, and also informs him that she needs to talk about something with the ward. The deputy begins the conversation by talking about a recent visit. Chade's parents demanded Charlie's unconditional expulsion, and would hear no other word. The disconcerted woman then repeated that Charlie Chade had been the first to invade the abode. So the guy had to accept this challenge as the most ordinary self-defense. There was no reason for exception. But Chade's mother was extremely persistent, accusing the school of continuing to cover up for the scoundrel who dared to destroy his own classmate's sphere. Sawyer decided to make it clear once again that the school had evidence that Chade had bullied other students, including Charlie, who was generally diligent. The woman didn't even want to listen to her interlocutor. She shouted even louder, demanding a clear answer to her question, whether the school would expel Charlie or not. The vice principal remained surprisingly calm, politely apologizing to Chade's mother and answering in the negative. Chade's father accepted the teacher's words, but also informed him that as a father he could not leave things so easily. If the request was not granted, he would no longer worry about the school's reputation. As a result, the man decided to send a squad of 1,000 of his representatives against Charlie. He doesn't care about the result of the invasion of the younger sphere, but supposedly this will definitely calm him down. Xavier apologizes. That's all the school could do. Chade's father wouldn't make any other concessions, but she asks if Charlie can handle it because the power is no joke. He says that he will sort everything out. He thanks the deputy for his help, and after hanging up, the guy assumes that one self-detonating locust won't be enough in this situation. He'll have to speed up a bit. Charlie raises his hand, calling for extreme measures and making a sacrifice in the form of almost 5 billion lives of his representatives, who are mercilessly sucked into the death vortex. A fiery column of unprecedented dimensions rises into the sky. Charlie looks at the system window with the results of his donation. The options are the same as last time, namely 3. He thinks that for a donation of such an amount, it is very good. And the choice is already made. Charlie again chooses the third option, the Imperial Windsword, heroic representative type Windsword. A huge gray-haired and long-haired old man with 4 arms materializes in front of the guy. His name is the Emperor Sword of the Wind. Charlie studies his status window. The sword respectfully addresses Charlie as a god, stating that he needs a sword. A magical glow emanates from it, and a symbol similar to a charmed tattoo burns on its forehead. The guy answers with a smile. No problem. The old man continues to silently exude a bluish aura. God enters the equipment store. Because he had spent the last few days speeding up the Locust's reproduction, they were giving him 100 million faith power a day, and it was beginning to transform the divinity points. Equipment is divided into 4 categories: normal, sacred, divine power equipment, and divine equipment. Charlie is considering purchasing the Whirlwind Sword, which belongs to sacred. The guy offers Sword to take this very sword, the Whirlwind Sword, into his hands, and he obeys, running a studying, appraising glance over the blade. The swordsman immediately prepares to test his new weapon, making a sweeping slashing motion forward, which with its energy and great strength seems to cut through the air itself. The sword speaks, addressing its god with the same respect as before, that it needs 3 more such swords to release the true power. The interlocutor listens to it attentively. The latter is amazed and puzzled to himself. 3 whirlwind swords will cost him a whole 150 points of divine power, and they don't grow on trees. The guy thinks about the fact that tomorrow he will have to fight with Harry Bond's 1,000-strong army, and the demigods should not be underestimated, and decides to try his luck by clicking on the screen. Cyan meditates in her god sphere, surrounded by lightning crackling with its naked charges. Ghostly hummingbirds fly around her, sometimes hovering in the air, sometimes touching and landing on the girl's clothes and body parts. The pink-haired girl's eyes are closed as she clears and tunes her thoughts and mind. But something still lingers in my mind, the memory of her drowning. And in that memory, there is also Charlie running across the lawn near the pond. He saved the then little Kian from certain death, fearlessly pulling her out of the water. The inexperienced boy then gave her artificial respiration, breathing new life into the girl. She saw him from under her lowered eyelashes, feeling the touch of warm lips. The grown-up Kian still remembers their taste as if it were now. The girl's cheeks turn a deep blush. She calls Charlie an idiot who will die because of his own stupidity. In her family, there are demigods and one true god. With her protection, there would be nothing to fear. Xian's mouth drops open in uncontrollable surprise when she sees who is calling her. The embarrassment seems to disappear when, instead of greeting him, she asks Charlie if he has changed his mind and decided to become her slave. However, the guy has other intentions. He says that he just wanted to borrow some divine power from a classmate. The girl's gaze becomes serious. She asks what will happen after the power is borrowed, when the debt is returned. Because Charlie's representatives are weak, even the new species barely reaches the elite. The guy is not going to convince Kian or argue with her. Instead, in order not to waste time, he suggests just forgetting about it, and, saying goodbye, hangs up, leaving the girl surprised. Her cheeks flush again. She clutches her head in despair, wondering why such caustic words have escaped her mouth again, when she wanted to say something completely different. Now the guy probably misunderstood everything, and in order to dissuade him, Xian decides to call him back and explain. Charlie asks what's going on, and the girl asks how much he needs to borrow, and, embarrassed, asks for the account number. The Windsword is in a fighting stance. Each of his hands holds a sword. The guy says that he spent all his savings on it, and also got into debt. He will have to work it off. Voices can be heard from the class, surprised that Charlie came at all, and wondering if he isn't afraid that the demigod's army will trample his god sphere, and others join the dialogue. Charlie stands surrounded by his classmates, no one uttering a word. To himself, he believes that everyone expects him to fail, and there is nothing surprising about this. Qian approaches the company, asking if this is why the guy borrowed the glasses from her, and advises not to waste his strength in vain, as right now Charlie would hardly be able to cope even with a 1,000-strong army of the demigod. The guy smiles not very cheerfully, saying that he has no other choice. Cyan approaches him, saying that there is a choice. If he agrees to become her slave, her family will be able to calm Harry Bond, because he is the only demigod in his family, and the girl weighs much more. Charlie says he appreciates the girl's concern, but it doesn't change his answer and turns away from her, saying he needs to prepare for battle. One of the classmates is angry. He does not understand why Xian is so worried about this loser, but he reassures himself that today will be the end for him. The door to the office opens and 3 people appear in the doorway. One of them is the class teacher. He ingratiatingly asks Chade's parents to come inside. Standing at his desk in front of the class, the man points his finger at Charlie, calling him out and saying that he is the one who hurt the Bond family's son. The pair look at the teenager sternly and with condemnation. The woman starts shouting curses at her son's classmate first, threatening and asking how he dared to encroach on her son's sphere of the gods. Her husband tries to calm her down. The class teacher, in a commanding tone, tells his charge to get up so as not to keep Mr. Bond waiting. The guy smiles a wide smile, saying that he would rather wait for Deputy Xavier Murray. The man starts to get even more worked up, saying that the deputy has other things to do, and that he alone will be enough as a witness to this battle, and he calls the young man to get up and come over. The deputy director enters the classroom, asking in her usual tone why the class teacher of these children is making so much noise. 3 angry pairs of eyes are directed at her. Laramie begins to blush, making excuses and apologizing for the disturbance, and saying that he was just trying to teach his students a few useful lessons. Murray reminds him of his status. The head of the Bond family, crossing his arms over his chest, remarks that since the deputy director is already here, they can begin. The woman asks her ward, looking only at him if he is ready. He, smiling decisively, confirms the teacher's words. When the man draws the invasion card forward, his eyes, as well as the aura around him, glow purple, and a malicious smile appears on his face. Charlie heads into the whirlpool that is now familiar to him, but his face now shows determination. The guy finds himself in front of similar gates, just like last time, and after opening them, behind the huge doors, there is also a dark clod of unknown creatures with evil red eyes. As they come closer, it becomes clear that in front of him are humanoid wolves, reminiscent of werewolves, their mouths grinning eerily in anticipation. The classmates are watching the live broadcast again. One of them comments on the wolf cavalry, which consists only of elite creatures, and the leader of the army seems to be completely beyond the concept of elite. Someone explains to the ignorant, the wolf cavalry is a combination of orcs and wild wolves. Their equipment is high quality. The classmate doesn't have a chance, but he looks ahead with confidence. Harry Bond promises to make Charlie pay for what the latter did to his son, and warns him not to even expect to leave here alive. Although the wolf cavalry consists of two types of representatives, the sphere counts one rider in the form of an orc, and one wolf as one enemy unit. So there are clearly more than 1,000 of them. Scion expresses his thoughts out loud to Sawyer, considering the battle with 2,000 representatives instead of 1,000 a cheat, but she remains silent. Harry Bond orders his cavalry to charge, and they, having been waiting for the order for a long time, rush forward. But Charlie's posture doesn't change, his locust pushing forward, wanting to protect their god. The classmates are discussing the fight heatedly, noticing that the guy has almost 7 million elite locusts, but yesterday he had about 20,000 left. Even for the locusts with their reproduction, this is impressive. Even the weakest elite creatures could be a problem if outnumbered. But Charlie was unlucky that the fight was scheduled for the next day. For the demigod's cavalry, that number was not scary. Laramie says that he is sorry that their school will have to say goodbye to such a talent, because if it were not for the guy's stubbornness and obstinacy, he would have been able to show his talent in the future. One of Charlie's classmates points at the screen and asks what it is. The teacher looks at him with a frown. The other guy looks at him with admiration. Wild wolves raise their muzzles upward, looking around in bewilderment. Charlie orders the magma locust to attack, and it does so with gusto, diving down at lightning speed on its enemies, leaving them bewildered. The wolves howl and bare their mouths in an evil grin, not yet suspecting what awaits them. The next moment, they are attacked by a multitude of insects, exposing their bodies not only to explosions, but also to magma akin to grenade fragments, and the battlefield is filled with animal squeals and whines. The audience notices that the explosive power of this type is significantly higher than the normal self-detonating locust, and on top of that, they also spray lava, and wonder if this is also an elite type. Looking over his shoulder, Sawyer asks the students if there is anyone with sensory abilities among them, if anyone can see information about this species. One of the students responds, his appraisal showing that the magma locust is indeed an elite-type creature. The woman holds her fists for her ward. She praises him. Cian, standing next to her, looks at her classmate with admiration. Harry Bond steps forward, telling Charlie not to even dream of some insects being able to destroy his wolf cavalry, and orders his subjects to use the Force. The wolf leader is surrounded by a purple light, as if coming from the hand of the head of the Bond family, and bursts into a blood-curdling howl. Other wolves join him, spewing icy mist from their mouths. This icy aura comes into contact with the heat left behind by magma locust Charlie, and seconds later, all the fire and heat dies out, leaving behind only physical damage to the surfaces. The observers are not surprised, arguing that the demigod is a demigod. He cannot be defeated by tricks. Their elite has many skills and abilities. Charlie is noticeably inferior now. Harry is going to show his son's classmate his despair, threatening that once he gets his sphere, the boy will be expelled from school. Then there will be no patrons left to protect him from the wrath. The demigod wolf cavalry troops rush into battle, and are given the order to destroy the students' core. The wild wolves run past the locust's master, who only watches them with an indifferent gaze. Sawyer Murray, looking down like Cian, says that this is the end for her ward. The girl keeps her thoughts to herself. One of the observers calls everyone else to look at the Charlie sphere, saying that there is someone standing there. The girl with pink hair quickly looks at the screen. The wolves resolutely approach the sphere, but in front of it there really is some kind of silhouette, resembling the body of an obese man with 4 blades. Indeed, if you look closely, you can recognize in the silhouette an elderly man with long hair, and only his face is hard to see. Someone notices that he has the whirlwind swords in his hands, one of which costs 50 points of divine power. In total, Charlie forked out 200. The onlookers are also interested in the creature. Mrs. Sawyer comes to the rescue. She knows that the creature is a representative of the windsword race. Those below the elite type are not born. The woman smiles happily. One of the schoolchildren asks if this changes anything. In his opinion, the strength of the head of the Bond family surpasses Charlie. But looking at the woman, he admits that he is wrong. The woman thinks, a puzzled look appears on her face. Of course, her ward is right, but the fluctuations of power emitted by the windsword do not look like elite. He is more like a hero. Harry is running through his head thoughts similar to Murray. He trained for decades, but was only able to raise one hero-type creature. Where could a schoolboy have gotten such a creature from? The man orders his subjects to seize the sword, but not to kill it. He wants to take the creature for himself. He gives the order to destroy the boy's core and bring him the hero. A magical tattoo appears on the hero's forehead, and like his eyes, lights up with a bright light. The long-haired man draws his bushy eyebrows together. He raises his blades up, watching his approaching enemies and preparing to engage in combat. 2 orcs on wolves are rapidly approaching, brandishing their barbaric weapons. The man unleashes a strike called the 3rd-level Storm Slash, and the enemy warriors' bodies fall to the ground, cut in 2. The wise old man deftly twirls blades in all his hands at once, shining with glowing eyes and combining deadly techniques with skillful movements of a seemingly gigantic body. He uses level 1 steel vortex, and several wolves fly up in shock with a distinctive whine. New ones come to the aid of their fallen comrades, but they themselves understand inside that exactly the same fate awaits them. An orc rushes forward, opening his fanged mouth wide and releasing icy breath with a roar, his red eyes blazing with hatred and malice. The enemy's technique causes the mighty old man's lower legs to turn to ice and freeze to the surface, but his face is calm. One of the orcs, uttering a war cry, raises his hand with a sword, thereby giving his wolves the order to attack. The red-eyed monsters, opening their mouths, rush to attack. But Sword, his eyes flashing, raises all 4 hands up. He has a plan. A whirlwind begins to rise from the tops of the blades, swirling and forming a funnel. The swordsman uses the iron sword style. The wolves are forced to freeze in anticipation. The man directs this stream of pure energy in front of him, bringing it down on his enemies, and they immediately disappear behind this ghostly light. The sword speaks the activation words, and an area for a decent distance around it is covered in an explosion, spreading a shockwave in its wake. Some of Charlie's classmates watching the epic spectacle think that this is too much, while the faces of everyone else express bewilderment. The four-armed elder stands majestically over one of the defeated enemies, his gaze stern and merciless. Harry swears. He orders the wolf cavalry general to raze the place to the ground. The anger in the man's voice is clearly heard. A huge wolf paw takes a step forward, a purple and powerful aura swirling around it. The wolf cavalry general enters the battle, his red eyes gleaming menacingly and his face impenetrable. When Harry hears a voice behind him, he jumps in surprise, and the man is asked if he really thought of breaking his word. A majestic man appears next to him. His gaze is serious. Based on the address of the head of the Bond family, one can conclude that this man is the director. Harry's voice trembles, his hand pointing towards his army as he tells the man he wouldn't dare, and orders the wolf cavalry to retreat, the man hovering nearby. The director looks at Charlie and his great swordsman standing a little further away. A half smile appears on the man's lips as he gives a good assessment of his charge's battle. Charlie is praised. He did well. But you shouldn't relax just because you got a hero. Heroes are not invincible. With the current level of strength, it will be difficult to even squeeze into the top 3 of the school. A guy approaches the deputy director. He has a request. A woman is interested in her character. With a determined look, the schoolboy declares that he wants to transfer to another class. His class teacher looks at his charge in bewilderment. The man changes his tune, admitting that he had indeed spent little time with the student before, but now promises to improve in order to make him one of the best. Smiling sweetly, Laramie asks to give him another chance, because he can provide the student with all the necessary resources for development, while thinking to himself about his own selfish goals. But Charlie is not going to give in. He once again repeats his request to change classes. The man looks at him discouraged, unable to put a couple of words together. Sawyer joins the conversation. She says that a guy can't just change classes because there are many school rules for this. But despite this, he can try to pass the test that the school will prepare, and if he passes it successfully, he can still realize his desire. Charlie firmly clenches his fist and declares his readiness to take this test, while his classmates standing behind him look at the boy in surprise. Sheehan suddenly jumps up from her seat and interrupts the conversation, declaring that she is also ready to take the test to change classes. Laramie looks at the girl puzzled and, feeling awkward, says that if she is not happy with something, she can contact him directly and not act so thoughtlessly. He offers to stay after class to discuss it, but the girl says that she has no complaints against him, she just wants to change classes. Another student raises his hand, standing up from his seat and declaring that he also wants to change classes. Now standing next to Kian looks at him in surprise. Laramie barely contains his anger, asking why Salt Church wants to leave. He is the class president, and he thanks the teacher and says that he has good reasons for doing so. The guy turns his gaze to Kian, thinking that he will follow her anywhere, and one day she will definitely become his. The deputy director agrees with everything, saying that they will have everything ready by tomorrow, and then turns to leave and asks Laramie to follow her. The clock on the front of the school shows 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A girl follows Charlie as he leaves. She runs after him, asking where the guy got the hero from, but he replies that it has nothing to do with Kian. The girl says that she certainly does, because her classmate owes her 150 points of divine power, and if he doesn't return them to her, he will become her slave. So she has the right to know where the hero came from. The guy calmly says that he will return 5 points as a percentage right now, but he won't tell anything about the hero. It doesn't work that way. He makes a move, hiding in the portal, and the girl shouts a curse after him, looking at the almost closed funnel. Charlie moves to his divine residence. The guy opens the locust quantity status window and, after checking the numbers, concludes that he won't be able to gather a large army in a couple of days. Tomorrow's test will be difficult for him. The sword approaches the god of this place, informs the owner that the white wolves and riders have hidden in the mines, and asks if he should get rid of them. The guy thinks about it. He guessed about such an outcome and understands that it is impossible to leave enemies alive. But a regular murder would be a great waste. Before the young god can give the order to his subordinate to seize them without killing them, he takes off from the spot, hurrying to fulfill the will. 2 hours later, the tied-up werewolves are already kneeling before the owner of this place, and he looks at them without much enthusiasm. Charlie considers sacrificing the enemy representatives and opens the appropriate system window. He takes the necessary stance, starting the process of sacrifice, and winds begin to swirl around him. There are 3 options to choose from based on the result: a single alpha mechanism, a first-level artifact, a smelting furnace blueprint, and also 1 or 3 observation towers. Charlie doesn't like any of the options. The first one is not bad, but the guy is not sure that he will be able to control it through the locusts. It is unlikely that she will be able to cook anything in the furnace, and from a shallow height, it is unlikely that she will be able to see anything. He remembers that he had about 200 orcs left after defeating Chad, and he wonders what they are doing now. Charlie activates Hawkeye. Green monsters do physical work, they mine ore. Noticing that the huge ghostly eye of their new god is watching them, one of the orcs thanks him for giving the race a wonderful life. The guy remembers that after the victory, he gave them only one order, to mine ore, and suggests that the race was originally created for the purpose of mining ore, and Chade forced them to fight. If you look closely at the work of the orcs, you can really see the talent. This can be used in the future, turning them into equipment manufacturers. Then the furnace can come in handy. Upon purchasing and installing it, Charlie tells the orcs that he is gifting them this smelter and hopes that the creatures will live up to his expectations, and they are flattered, expressing recognition and gratitude. A teacher's council is taking place, with Laramie sitting at the head of the table, raising the issue of transferring his students and asking what his colleagues think about it, since the school entrusted it to them. One of them thinks that there is nothing to think about. He just wants to express gratitude to the one who started for the fact that 3 of the best students in the class will immediately go to one of the teachers. Laramie says he doesn't particularly care about Cyan and Salt's fate, but he wants the hardest test possible for Charlie, because he didn't value his teacher, and he asks for a concession from his colleagues. The man reflects on the fact that what is happening is Charlie's fault, so he simply has to punish him. Meanwhile, several hands rise into the air, their owners ready to support him. Sometime later, Laramie holds in his hand 3 sheets of paper with the required tests, and looking at them, notifies the students about this. Salt, who received the test first, reads the lines written on the sheet with a smile, which are typical for the first level. He needs to defend himself from 1,000 invaders, as well as a wish for good luck. Sheehan looks at her sheet in surprise. She has exactly the same task, the same level. The face of the last student who received and looked at his assignment was distorted with discontent and bewilderment. A test of the 10th level was prepared for him. On the man's hand holding the piece of paper it is written that he needs to defend himself from 10,000 invaders. Sawyer looks at the teacher with confusion when he asks if he thinks he was biased towards his student, but he counters that it was the decision of all the teachers, not his own. Charlie himself turns his